My name is Edward McGonigal. I'm a sophomore here at Creighton University and a BFA theater performance major. So far while at Creighton, I've been involved in several productions on the technical and performance level. In addition, I also help and volunteer in the costume and scene shop and have helped build most of the costumes and sets that you've seen these past couple of years. What's interesting here is the theater major at Creighton diversifies itself by containing a great all-around knowledge of many elements of the production. I've worked on tech crews, ran fly rails, built sets, participated in stage readings, and have recently worked to bring a script analysis club to Creighton's campus. So when Travis and his group asked me if I could speak about Tartuffe in the production we just recently put on, I said, sure. Do you want me to do it with my eyes closed? So the first question may be, why bring a show like Tartuffe to Creighton? Well, it's very interesting to ponder. You know, the show was originally produced in 1664, closed, and then had to be rewritten by Moliere and reproduced in 1669. That's almost, probably close to 350 years ago. So why should I or any rambunctious young adult care about something so trivial as a story of a man who got conned by a priest? The answer is relevance. Much like many of the great famous authors we acknowledge today, Shakespeare, Blake, Marlowe, Conrad, Fitzgerald, Williams, you have to look past just the language and the prose it's written in. You have to dig deeper, find an underlining meaning, use the subtext to get what the author's really trying to attack and hit right hard on the head. For that gets the reader or the viewer into the mindset where they can be open and finally reach a higher cultural and intellectual understanding. Tartuffe is packed with massive themes that are still very relevant today. One of the biggest and easiest themes to note is that of religious hypocrisy. Recall that during this time, being pious pretty much meant you were in a position of power, which is what the Catholic Church was at this time in France. They were a huge political unit, and much controversy stirred over this story when it first came. Whether you were a noble or a peasant, you looked towards the pious person to point you in the right direction. They were synonymous with virtue and moral discipline. And for Moliere to come out in this time and to accuse or write a character that's a pious man that turns out to be a dirty, rotten scoundrel, how would that look to you? How would you react to that? Again, times are different now, and we have freedom of speech and religion and separation of church and state. But not everything is fine and dandy. Recently, back in 2007, an American Christian group called the Lifeway Research conducted a survey of which they asked participants about their beliefs and church-going habits. A majority of the participants said they believed in God, but did not attend Mass. And when asked why, 72% of those non-church goers said it was because the church is full of hypocrites. Now, we can go back and forth all day and argue whether the church is full of hypocrites or not, but that's irrelevant. The fact is, people think it, people are asking the question, and now you're doubting. And in doubt, where do you turn? Well, obviously, to logic and reasoning. Keep in mind, Moliere was a product of the Enlightenment. He was a big proponent of reason. One of his main characters, Oregon, uses no reason at all throughout the entire play. He is so warped up and trapped up in this idea of Tartuffe that even though people are pointing his follies all around him, he cannot believe it. Yet the clear evidence is there. One of the last themes we will discuss is the social constructs that Moliere creates out of these characters, especially the women. For most of the play, they are treated very poorly. We open up to a scene in the beginning where Oregon's talking to Cleon about how his wife is doing, and Oregon is just so obsessed. All he asks about is Tartuffe, while Moliere has been throwing up sick for days. Madame Purnell, another example of someone who is wrapped around this cloak that Tartuffe has woven over them and covered her eyes to the truth of what he really is. She is old and stubborn and is stuck to her gut that Tartuffe is an honest man. And she, just like her son, refuses to believe, even when it has been proven true at the end. Marianne, she's an obeying and loving daughter, but yet she seeks to change her father's mind, and when she doesn't, she goes off and whines like a little girl for about 45 minutes. But it's very, very interesting how people treat the women in this show. What's also interesting is just the buffoonery of half of these characters. Whether it's the hot-tempered Damas or the overdramatic Moliere, they provide much comic relief in their tomfoolery. Another interesting character to point out is Doreen. Doreen is the head maid and literally the most logical person within the family and the show, without a doubt. But yet, who is going to listen to her? She's a maid, and what was Moliere trying to say by making a maid, a servant, be the smartest one out of a house full of nobility? And even, of course, the pious man Tartuffe. So when bringing a play that was almost written over 350 years ago back to the modern stage, there are going to be some changes and some new things that we would like to add to the production. One of those being, we used the Richard Wilbur translation, which is actually the translation used among most colleges, universities, and repertoire theaters here in the United States. What's interesting about Wilbur's translation is he keeps Moliere's original verse, just tweaks it slightly to the English language. Another thing we wanted to add was, with the costume and the turn of the century Victorian era, we wanted to bring a new style and flair to Tartuffe. So we set it 100 years in advance than what it was previously written for. So we have set it for the late 1700s, in the 18th century, when it was truly written for the 17th century, late 1600s. And the other element we added was, in between each act, we had musical interludes. These were short little quips with Doreen and some maids going around doing household chores and getting the house ready for the day. On a practical and technical aspect, having these interludes play while people were moving about moving things allowed us to move props and scenery on and off the set without going into a blackout or closing the curtain, thereby cutting off the audience or making them feel a break. It had a nice even flow to it. And also, of course, the maids are just as crazy as everybody else in the family, with the exception of Doreen, and hilarity ensues in these little quips where people are fighting about with feathers, playing with masks, and even throwing food at each other. As with any production, there are many challenges to producing a show, but even bigger are the stakes with Tartuffe. Last year, if any of you saw Urinetown, that budget was over budget by $5,000, and although I cannot quite say how much we spent legally on Tartuffe, I can say it was quite high. The set was extravagant, and that whole ceiling took about 2 weeks to get in, and we still have it up now. We refuse to take it down. Another thing, especially with comedies, especially like Tartuffe, is the satire is very, very direct, and you have to sit down and mold over it a little bit to truly get what you're saying and hit every point. And then another general fear with a lot of comedies is actors get so caught up in, I want this line to be funny. Why isn't this funny? How do I make this funny? With especially like a play like Tartuffe, it is so wonderfully written. Let the lines flow. Just speak. The comedy will come. You can't be so wrapped up on the comedy that you... Another challenge, much like a lot of the plays written in this time, is you have to have the right actor. Thankfully, we had a senior and a junior. Arts and Sciences senior Shannon Lampkin played the amazing Doreen with all her classic wit and charm. And we had a junior BFA thesis major, Michael Conroy, play the villainous Tartuffe. Both these actors, the past semester, have been working tirelessly in and outside of the classroom to not only get down the lines, but to develop a sense of character. They both practiced methods in Stanislavski and also Anton Chekhov. When asked about the recent closing of the productions, both actors took a sigh of relief first, and then said, "We had a wonderful time, it was always fun, and Tartuffe will live on, even in jail." That's all we have time for today. Thank you again. I'm Eddie.